Israel is at war with the people of Iran. That's not an exaggeration. This isn't hyperbole. It's not my spin on what Israel is doing. It's the literal official position of Israel. As you'll know, Israel launched an unprovoked attack on Iran last week, justified on the basis that Iran wasn't far away from getting a nuclear bomb, a claim that has literally been made now almost since the Iranian Revolution itself in 1979. And at the very time when progress has been made with negotiations between Iran and the US on a nuclear deal. We'll discuss that further. Indeed, we know as a fact that Israel itself actually does have nuclear weapons. Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. Nobody thinks or claims Israel now has any nuclear weapons. Iran is a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel is not. And Israel is a nuclear-armed state which has not only committed genocide in Gaza, not only committed a massive pogrom in the West Bank, not only razed much of southern Lebanon to the ground, it's also invaded Syria. Its government ministers openly talk about creating a greater Israel which annexes parts of Lebanon and Syria. It is clearly an aggressive, expansionistic, militaristic, genocidal state with nuclear weapons. The term gaslighting doesn't even begin to cover this. Israel's onslaught is completely illegal. It violates the UN Charter, which prohibits any attack on the grounds of an alleged future threat. That is not self-defense. At least 200 civilians have been killed in Iran during Israel's attack. We'll discuss some of those hideous details. Now, some of the commentary has focused on how this is somehow for the good of the people of Iran. This could liberate them. Well, let's just read this candid tweet, shall we, from Israel Katz, the defense minister of Israel, who says the following. The arrogant dictator from Tehran has become a cowardly murderer who fires targeted shots at the civilian home front in Israel. Whew, the front of these people. We'll talk about that. To deter the IDF from continuing the attack that is collapsing its capabilities. The residents of Tehran will pay the price, and soon. No room for ambiguity here whatsoever. The Israeli defense minister has declared that the civilians of Iran's capital are targets. They will be killed and maimed by the Israeli military. In practice, that's obviously what that means. That is an open confession of war crimes. Once again, as in Gaza and indeed Lebanon, the Israeli state is not even trying to disguise its criminal intentions. If that's not enough for you, there is more. He said the fate of Tehran will be like the fate of Beirut. Israel, of course, has inflicted massive destruction in Beirut, slaughtered huge numbers of civilians in multiple attacks. Now, this refers to something called the Dahiyeh doctrine, named after an area in the southern suburb of Beirut, where the Hezbollah militia was particularly powerful. Let me read what Paul Rogers, Emeritus Professor of Peace Studies, wrote about this in 2023. This was the deliberate application of disproportionate force, such as the destruction of an entire village deemed to be the source of rocket fire. One graphic description of the result was that around 1,000 Lebanese civilians were killed, a third of them children. Towns and villages were reduced to rubble, bridges, sewage treatment plants, port facilities, and electric power plants were crippled or destroyed. In other words, you deliberately inflict large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure with the intention of hurting civilians as an intentional strategy in an attempt to turn civilians against the militia or administration in question. Now, using violence against civilians in order to achieve political ends, we've got a name for that in the English language. It's called terrorism. Yet the term terrorism is politicized, so it is only applied to militants or regimes deemed hostile to Western interests, so that Western violence, even though it's much greater, is deemed legitimate and moral. Indeed, the Israeli regime is trying to depopulate the Iranian capital. Let's listen to this from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, who is subject to an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court.
Two existential threats, the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat. And we're doing that as we speak now in Tehran, but we're not bombing the population. We're telling the population, leave. So when we hit the targets embedded in civilian areas, you won't be hurt. And there's now mass migration from Tehran right now. That's what's happening. So because we're giving them forewarning.
Ignore his nonsense claims about not targeting the population. I mean, this is classic Israeli strategy. To their own people, when speaking in Hebrew, they openly declare, as we've seen, they're at war with civilians. Then when they appear on Western media outlets, they claim they have no quarrel with civilians, merely the regime. Western media outlets then ignore the public statements of criminal intent made to the Israeli population by Israeli leaders and officials, as though these statements are being issued in some sort of parallel universe. They then treat these Israeli statements, which are solely issued as propaganda for Western audience, and to relieve pressure on Israel's Western allied governments as Israel's actual position. In any case, what Netanyahu is saying here is Israel is seeking to drive out the civilian population of Tehran. Speaking of car bombs, Israel is detonating car bombs in Tehran. Just imagine Iran was detonating car bombs in Tel Aviv or New York or London. Can you imagine it? It would be portrayed as absolutely obscene terrorism. Yet no outrage whatsoever when Israel does it. Yes, of course, Western power has always treated international law as something to opt in and out of as it sees fit, weaponizing it against its enemies when it so wishes. But the way any semblance of international order is being shredded will, of course, only lead to blood and chaos. Israel is killing nuclear scientists, some of them alongside their wives and their children. Let's hear this report from Al Jazeera.
Start with the toll and the foreign ministry saying 70 women and children are among those killed by Israel. What sort of impact is that having on the Iranian mood?
Extensive impact, I would say. We've seen a lot of actually civilian casualties as a result of this recent strikes. In one of the cases, the IRIB, the state TV, reported that at least 20 children were killed as a result of one of these strikes on one of the buildings. And also, we were at the scene of another building in which Iranian top nuclear scientist Dr. Tehranchi was killed. And there we saw that not only his family, but a lot of other people, university professors, were killed. And time and again, reports are coming out about the attacks on the civilian targets. And now we've got Israeli officials saying that they're sending messages of warning that people, ordinary people in the capital, are not going to be safe. And this indicates that this is initially said to be limited to nuclear sites or military facilities, but now it moves on towards an unprecedented, dangerous level that runs the risk of further escalations, further casualties for civilians. But speaking of the latest development, as you mentioned last night, it was the head of public relations of Health Ministry coming out on his X account, putting the death toll on 224, but right now, a few hours ago, we've got reports from Zanjan and Qom, in each of which we've got at least 2 people killed. So right now, we can say at least 228 people have been killed, and with hundreds more being injured. It doesn't seem like a good situation for ordinary citizens.
Aside from Israel's own official statements, if you want evidence that this is not about liberating the Iranian people, as some of Israel's dupes are claiming, let's listen to actual Iranian opponents of the Islamic Republic, like the Iranian writer Saha Delijani, who posts on Instagram, "I was born in an Iranian prison. My parents were held in their jails. My uncles lie in their mass graves. Nothing you can tell me about the crimes of the Iranian regime that I haven't lived in blood and bone. That doesn't mean I want my people bombed, maimed, killed, their homes in ruins. If your vision of liberation comes only through the destruction of innocent lives, then it's not freedom you're after." As the analyst Artem Yoni, who was raised in Tehran, puts it, "In no universe is Netanyahu Iran's liberator. Many Iranians are disgruntled and dismayed with the Islamic Republic, but they stand united behind Iran and its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Israeli government has severely miscalculated and misunderstood the Persian psyche." Iran expert Sina Tuzi, senior fellow at the Center of International Policy, agrees, saying 100%. Right now, Iran is seeing a textbook rally around the flag effect, signs of national solidarity across its political and social spectrum, from secular to religious, pro-democracy activists to prominent opposition leaders, a national spirit that echoes the 1980s. Israel, meanwhile, has come under attack from Iran after Israel attacked Iran. Just be clear about that. This is from former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, and it is classic gaslighting.
Iran, unprovoked, shot hundreds of missiles and rockets at Israel. We didn't do anything against Iran, and they did this twice last year.
What a joke. Israel bombed the Iranian embassy last year and then assassinated Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. The fact they didn't claim credit for it is besides the point. They did it, and we all know it, and they know it. Now, around 13 civilians are reported killed in Israel by Iranian attacks. And you know what? We can say, people can say, let's get the law out, right to self-defense enshrined in international law. You can say that. And indeed, far fewer civilians have been killed than in Iran. But I oppose any attacks which kill civilians. And every state has a responsibility to do all it can to avoid killing civilians in all circumstances. Every human life is precious. Every person is a whole universe. I want this war, which Israel started, to end with peace based on negotiations and justice. That's because I'm not a fucking maniac. Yet the response from Israel's officials decrying the killing of civilians is frankly just something else. Listen to this from an Israeli police spokesperson.
This is the result of the latest barrage of rockets fired at our residential communities by Iran. It's continuing the pattern as we're seeing. Each and every one of these scenes are targeting residential communities, civilians in their homes.
I don't don't know what else to say here other than fucking hell. I don't actually swear that often, given the gravity of the situation of the last 2 years, but Jesus, honestly. The Israeli-British propagandist Ilan Levy, former spokesperson for the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu before he was sacked, is posting multiple tweets declaring the Iranian regime is deliberately attacking Israeli civilians. Iran is deliberately targeting civilians with massive missile barrages. Ayatollah Khamenei should think twice before continuing his indiscriminate ballistic missile attacks against Israeli civilians. The Israeli president Isaac Herzog says last night Iran again unleashed a wave of missiles on Israel with one goal: to kill. Children asleep in their beds, grandparents, Holocaust survivors, a beautiful Muslim family in Tamra, Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians, evil, pure and deliberate. We mourn brothers and sisters torn from us. Israel is fighting to eliminate a threat. Tehran is fighting to spread one: hatred, chaos, terror, fanaticism. This is their ideology, and the world will stand with Israel for the sake of humanity. Are they doing this in order to provoke? The whole world has watched as Israel has wiped Gaza from the face of the earth, destroyed most of its homes, most of its hospitals, most of its schools, most of its mosques, libraries, universities, agriculture, livestock, everything. It's apocalyptic. It's as apocalyptic as it's possible to get, pretty much. These grotesque human beings, they will one day rot in prison cells. I've got no doubt about that. But the gall, the fun of them, is something else. And then there's this. A truly vile pro-Israel propagandist, Dr. Eli David, posts a video produced by Iran which claims that Israel is storing F-35 planes in residential towers. It says, Iran attacked a residential building complex in Tel Aviv. After cheering the attack on civilians, they shifted narrative and released this video claiming that Israel stores F-35 planes in residential towers. It looks like those in charge of their propaganda are dead too. These are replicas of the sorts of videos Israel has repeatedly released. For example, falsely claiming Hamas's headquarters were located under Al-Shifa Hospital. That was then used to justify destroying the entire healthcare system of Gaza. As a brilliant academic, Alonso Gomendi, writes, it's so baffling how they don't realise they are being mocked. Rather than any imminent threat from Iran, Israel launched this war in order to destroy any chance of a negotiated settlement with the US. Progress was reported in talks. Let's listen to CNN anchor and veteran journalist Christiane Amanpour being interviewed on the BBC.
There was a moment of actual successful diplomacy which culminated in the JCPOA in 2015. In other words, the nuclear deal that was enshrined at the UN. Iran was declared totally in compliance of its responsibilities, even though the West did not lift all the sanctions as it should have done. What happened then? President Trump decided, under pressure from Bibi Netanyahu, who has never wanted these deals ever, he has always wanted to destroy Iran's capability, right? Under pressure from Netanyahu and then MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, he pulled out thinking he could do a better deal. He couldn't. He achieved nothing except Iran enriching to a higher degree. So Iran now has approximately 400 kilograms of enriched uranium to 60%. That is almost at breakout. It can easily go to 90% if it wants to, and that's 8 bombs. So people are very concerned. But there were these talks going on, and my reporting suggests that far from they didn't want to go to a deal, Iran was really wanting to go to a new deal. And just before these attacks, I heard that the head of the negotiation and the delegation was feeling optimistic about this round of talks.
The Iranian delegation.
Yes, the Iranian delegation.
Meanwhile, the British government, which continues to arm and support Israel as it commits genocide in Gaza, has moved jets and other military hardware to the Middle East. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says, I will always make the right decision for the UK. We are moving assets to the region, including jets, and that is for contingency support in the region. The polling in Britain couldn't be clearer. 19% say the UK should back Israel, 5% say Iran, 75% say neither or unsure. Younger Britons, just 8% say Israel, 15% Iran, 77% say neither or unsure. No appetite for involvement in Israel's latest criminal enterprise. One final thing. Western media outlets are openly saying this has stopped pressure on Israel over its genocide in Gaza. The slaughter in Gaza has reportedly escalated, not least with repeated massacres of desperately hungry Palestinians trying to get food. The headline of The Guardian is Strikes on Iran ease pressure on Israel to end starvation in Gaza. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has declared she's spoken to Netanyahu, saying Israel has the right to defend itself, that Iran is the main source of regional instability, and then what she calls the humanitarian situation in Gaza is added as some afterthought. We must not forget Gaza. The genocide has not ended, only escalated. What we're witnessing here, I'm afraid, is the world being plunged into violent barbarism by the West. Those who smear opponents of obscene war crimes and mass murder as stooges of the Iranian regime, as they smeared us as stooges of Saddam Hussein, Colonel Gaddafi and the Taliban in the previous catastrophes they cheered on, where everything they said was proved calamitously wrong, where we were vindicated in the worst possible way. Those people are cheerleaders of plunging the world into chaos and barbarism. Our fight against these maniacs is existential. It's about the future of human civilization as we know it. If they win, if we lose, there is no future. Not a future that's worth living in, but a hideous, dystopian future of carnage. Don't give an inch. Not now, not ever. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in your comments. Help us take on the pro-genocide Western media at patreon.com/OwenJones84. Listen to us on the podcast. Share the video. I'll speak to you soon.